Hello students, today we will begin chapter 11, that is Chain and the Chimps. Chain and the Chimps. Students, in this chapter we will study about a girl named Jane Goodall who had special love for the animals like chimpanzees. She also was a social activist who tries to save the natural surroundings of the animals. Okay, so let us read more about this chapter. Okay, so kindly open page number 97. Page 97. Okay, first I will read the paragraphs. Jane and the Chimps. Jane Goodall loved animals. As a child, she loved watching animals for hours. She wanted to know everything about them, what they eat and how they live. After finishing school, Jane went to Africa for work. Her job was to watch chimpanzees and write about them. So she moved to Gombe where the chimps lived. Every morning Jane walked into the forest, climbed to a peak and looked for chimps. I want to learn new things about them, she wrote in her diary. In the beginning, the chimps stayed away from Jane. Sometimes she couldn't see them for many days. She could only hear their pant-hoot calls to one another. But the chimps too were watching Jane. After a few weeks, the chimps slowly let Jane see them. Jane was very excited. She gave each chimp a different name. To her, every chimp was special. Okay, we'll see the meaning. So, it's given about Jane and the chimps. Jane was a girl. Her full name was Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, who loved animals. Okay, she loved to see the animals. Okay, and the chimps. Chimps means animals. Okay, chimps means, chimpanzees means small intelligent animals that live in Africa. They look like monkeys with no tails. Okay, so chimpanzees means small intelligent animals. They are small animals that live in Africa. Okay, so they live in Africa. They look like monkeys. They look like monkeys with no tails. Okay, so they look like monkeys and they do not have tails. Okay, so it's given about Jane and the chimpanzees. Okay, so Jane Goodall loved to see the animals. As a child, she loved watching animals for hours. Okay, so when she was a small child, she loved watching animals for hours, for a long time, hours and hours she liked to see the animals. She wanted to know everything about them. Okay, she had curiosity, she had keen desire to know more about the animals, what they eat and how they live. Okay, so she wanted to know more about the lifestyle of the chimps. Okay, so she wanted to know about their food, okay, what they eat and how they live. Okay, so Jane Goodall had curiosity, he had keen desire to know more about the chimpanzees. After finishing school, Jane went to Africa for work. Okay, so after completing her studies, where did she go? She went to Africa for work. Her job was to watch chimpanzees. Okay, chimpanzees, and write about them. Okay, her job was to watch. Okay, so she was watching the animals, which animals? Chimpanzees, and write more about them. Okay, so she had keen desire to know more about the chimpanzees. So she moved to Bombay where the chimps lived. Okay, so she moved. Okay, so she went to Bombay where the chimps lived. Bombay means a small forest in the country of Tanzania. Okay, small forest. Bombay means a small forest in the country of Tanzania. Okay, so country's name is Tanzania. It is famous for its chimpanzees. Okay, so in Tanzania there is a small forest in that country, and it is famous for the chimpanzees. Okay, that forest is famous for the chimpanzees. In that forest, chimpanzees live. Okay, so she moved to that place. Every morning, Jane walked into the forest, climbed to a peak, and looked for chimps. Okay, so every morning she used to go to the forest and climb to a peak and looked for chimps. Peak means the highest point of a hill or a mountain. She used to climb at the top of the mountain, highest peak. That means the top of the hill or a mountain. She used to climb and see the chimps. I want to learn new things about them. Okay, so she wanted to know new things about them. She wrote in her diary. So whatever she observed about them, she wrote in her diary. In the beginning, the chimps stayed away from Jane. Okay, so in the beginning, chimpanzees were not familiar with Jane, so they stayed away from her. Sometimes she couldn't see them for many days. Okay, so in the beginning, animals, they were not familiar, chimpanzees were not familiar, so they were not coming close to her. So she had no opportunity to see them. Okay, so she did not see them for many days. She could only hear their pant hoot calls to one. Okay, so she could hear only their pant hoot calls. What is the meaning of pant hoot calls? The sound made by chimpanzees. Okay, so pant hoot calls means the sound. The sound which is made by the chimpanzees is called pant hoot calls. Okay, so she could hear their sound only. But the chimps too were watching Jane. Okay, so chimps also they were watching Jane. After a few weeks, the chimps slowly let Jane see them. Okay, so they started slowly to be familiar with Jane, and they allowed Jane to see them. Jane was very excited. Okay, so Jane was very happy. She was so excited. She gave each chimp a different name. Okay, so she had a special love for the animals, for the chimpanzees. So she named them. So different chimpanzees had different names. She gave each chimp a different name. To her, every chimp was special. Okay, so for Jane, every chimp was special. Special means different from others. Okay, different from others. So to her, every chimp was special. Okay, so hope you have understood this much. Now we will read the next page, page number 98. Page number 98. First I will read the paragraphs. Then one day a chimp with a grey beard came close to Jane. She had named him David Greybeard. Jane offered him bananas. David Greybeard took bananas from my hands. she wrote in her diary that day. Jane learned many new things about chimps. She found out that chimps could make and use tools. Before this, nobody knew that wild animals made tools. She saw David Graveyard eat meat. Before this, everybody thought chimps only ate plants. Slowly, the chimps let Jane come even closer. They even let her sit among them. Chimps also around me. What a day, she wrote. For years, Jane spent most of her time among the chimps. She watched the chimps when they were happy. She saw them hold hands, hug, kiss and laugh just like people. Jane watched the chimps when they were angry or scared. She even saw them fight, but she kept out of the way. At the same time, forests in Africa were being cut down and animals were losing their homes. Jane's friends were in danger. So, Jane left Bombay and traveled all over the world. She asked people to help save the chimps and the forest. Jane returned to Bombay whenever she could. She watched and listened again to her friends in the forest. Okay, so now we will see the meaning of this page, page 98. Okay, so what happens? One day a chimp with a grey beard came close to Jane. Okay, so one chimp with a grey beard came close to Jane. So one chimp came to Jane. She had named him. So Jane had named him David Greybeard. Okay, so she had named this chimp David Greybeard. Jane offered him bananas. Okay, so Jane gave him a banana. David Greybeard took bananas from my hands. Okay, so David Greybeard took bananas from her Jane's hand. She wrote in her diary that day. Okay, so whatever she was saying, whatever she was experiencing, everything she was maintaining in the diary, everything she was writing in the diary. Jane learned many new things about chimps. Okay, now animals also, chimpanzees also, they have mingled with her. So now she came to know more about the chimps. She found out that chimps could make and use tools. Okay, she came to know that chimps also can make and use tools. Okay, what's the meaning of tools? Tools means things that help us do our work more easily. Okay, so things, so tools help us to do our work more easily. Okay, so Jane came to know that chimps also make and use the tools in their work. Before this, nobody knew that wild animals made tools. Okay, before this, nobody knew that animals also, chimpanzees also make and use the tools. She saw David Graveyard eat meat. Okay, so what did she observe? She also observed that David Graveyard eat meat. Okay, they also eat meat. Before this, everybody thought chimps only ate plants. Okay, before this, nobody knew that chimps eat meat. Okay, they only knew that, people knew that chimpanzees eat plants. Okay, but from this time they came to know that chimps eat meat too. Slowly the chimps let Jane come even closer. Okay, so slowly chimps are closer to Jane. Okay, so chimps let Jane come even closer. Okay, so chimpanzees allowed Jane to come more closer to them. They even let her sit among them. Okay, so they started her to sit among them. Okay, they allowed her to sit among them. Among means in the middle of. So Jane was allowed to sit in the middle of the chimps. Chimps all around me, what a day, she wrote. Okay, so in the middle of the chimps, Jane sat. Okay, so she wrote about them. Chimps all around me, what a day. So that day she could experience more about the chimps because she had sat among them. Okay, and she came to know more about them, and she wrote about them, and she wrote more about them in her diary. For years, Jane spent most of her time among the chimps. Okay, for years, so many years, Jane spent her time among the chimps. Okay, so chimps had become the friends to Jane. She watched the chimps when they were happy. Okay, so she was observing them, and she saw that when they were happy, she watched the chimps. Okay, so they also were happy. She saw them hold hands. Okay, she showed that chimps also hold their hands with other chimps. Hug, they also hug, kiss and laugh. Okay, so chimps also hold hands, they also hug, kiss and laugh, just like people. Okay, so like people, just like people also, chimps also, what do? They hold their hands with other chimps, they kiss, they hug, they laugh. Okay, Jane watched the chimps when they were angry or scared. Okay, Jane watched the chimps. So she was observing everything. Jane was observing, watching everything when they were angry or scared. So chimps also used to get angry. Okay, they were angry or scared. Okay, scared means frightened. Okay, so most of the time Jane spent with them. So she was observing their emotions also. Okay, she even saw them fight, but she kept out of the way. Okay, so she also noticed that chimps also fight. Okay, fight with the other animals, other chimps, but she kept out of the way. Kept out of the way means stayed away, did not come close to something or near between the fighting chimps. Okay, kept away the way. That means Jane kept herself away from their fight. She kept herself far from the fight. She did not involve her in the fight. At the same time, forests in Africa were being cut down and animals were losing their homes. Okay, so at the same time what she found, that forests in Africa were being cut down. Okay, so trees were being cut down and animals were losing their homes. Okay, so animals were losing their home because trees were being cut down. Jane's friends were in danger. Who were Jane's friend? Chimpanzees. Okay, so chimpanzees were in danger. So Jane left Bombay and traveled all over the world. Okay, so Jane left Bombay. Okay, and traveled all over the world. She traveled all over the world in order to save the trees. Okay, she asked people to help save chimps and the forest. Okay, she requested people to save the trees in order to save the natural homes of the animals. She asked people to help save the chimps and the forest. Okay, so she traveled all over the world and requested people to save the animals, save the chimpanzees and the forest. Jane returned to Bombay whenever she could. Okay, so whenever she got time, she returned to Bombay. She met with her friends. She watched and listened again to her friends in the forest. Okay, so she was the chimpanzees and listened again to her friends in the forest. Okay, so whatever problems and difficulties they had, she listened to them and she observed their difficulties, and whenever she got time, she went to Bombay and visited them. Okay, so hope you have understood about this topic, Jane and the chimps. Okay, so Jane had a special love for the chimps, and in order to save them, she traveled all over the world and tried to save the natural home of the animals, tried to save the forest in order to save the chimpanzees. Okay, so she had special love for the chimpanzees and she had keen desire to know more about the chimpanzees. Okay, so kindly read the paragraphs loudly and learn word meanings. Okay students, that's all for today. Thank you.